The summer sun in Arizona could be brutal, but our backyard pool was always a sanctuary. That afternoon I was floating on a pink inflatable lounger. Eyes half closed, the smell of chlorine and sunscreen mixing with the sound of birds chirping in the trees. My husband, Derek, was away on a business trip in Chicago, and I'd been feeling the weight of his absence more than usual. We'd been married 4 years, and though our relationship was steady, it lacked something. Lately the spark had dulled, replaced by the humdrum rhythm of daily life. I never thought I'd miss his arguments about how to load the dishwasher or his weird habit of singing 80s ballads in the shower, but I did. I wasn't entirely alone, though. Derek's father, Robert, had come to stay with us for a few weeks after a minor surgery on his knee. The plan was for him to recover in our guest room and enjoy some sun before returning to his home in Oregon. Robert was retired from his career as a fire chief, but he still carried himself with that quiet authority. He wasn't loud or overbearing, just solid and observant. Like a rock, he had that weathered salt and pepper look and a calm voice that made you want to spill your entire life story. That day he was sitting in one of the lounge chairs near the pool, sipping iced tea and flipping through a mystery novel. He wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and sunglasses, giving off a very cool, retired guy vibe. I floated lazily by and caught him glancing up from his book every so often, probably just making sure I didn't fall asleep and drown or something. I smiled at him and he raised his glass in a kind of lazy salute. "You okay out there, Emily?" he asked with that calm tone of his. "Yeah, just soaking in the last bit of summer before reality hits again," I replied. "You always were a water bug," he said. "Even when you and Derek were just dating, you'd spend hours in that pool." "Guilty," I said, stretching my arms. "It's the only place I can think and relax at the same time." He smiled and we sat in silence for a few minutes. I liked that about Robert. He didn't fill the air with empty words. He only spoke when there was something worth saying. I decided to go under for a swim, slipping off the lounger and gliding beneath the surface. The water was cool, crisp, and comforting, but when I kicked off the deep end wall and started to swim back, something unexpected happened. My calf cramped hard, the kind of cramp that locks up your leg and sends shockwaves of panic through your brain. I gasped and tried to paddle back, but the pain shot through my body like a jolt of electricity. I couldn't get my head above water. In a second I was flailing. The panic set in faster than I imagined. I tried to scream but swallowed water. Instead my vision blurred. The sky disappeared. Then arms, strong arms, firm and steady, they wrapped around my chest and lifted me toward the surface. I coughed violently as we broke through the waterline. I heard his voice, calm but urgent. "I've got you, Emily. You're okay." Robert pulled me to the pool steps and helped me sit down at the shallow end, one hand still on my back to make sure I didn't slide under again. I gasped for air, coughing and blinking away the tears and chlorine. My calf throbbed in agony, but I was alive. "You cramped up?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Yeah," I whispered. "Bad one." I couldn't move. He knelt beside me and gently rubbed my calf, working the knot out with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times. "Breathe, you're all right." Now the tension in my legs started to fade, replaced by exhaustion and disbelief. I looked up at him, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Of course," he said, his voice steady. "You scared the hell out of me, Em." His eyes softened and he brushed a wet strand of hair off my face. It was such a fatherly gesture, yet oddly intimate. We sat like that for a while. The world around us seemed to hush. The only sounds were the water dripping from our clothes and the breeze rustling the trees. I couldn't explain what I was feeling. Maybe it was the adrenaline, the vulnerability, or simply the relief, but in that moment Robert didn't feel like just my father-in-law. He felt like a protector, a presence I hadn't realized I needed. Later that evening I sat on the patio wrapped in a towel, sipping hot tea. Robert brought me a blanket and sat across from me in one of the Adirondack chairs. The stars were beginning to peek through the sky, and the heat of the day had mellowed into a balmy warmth. "You sure you're okay?" he asked again. "I am. Thanks to you." He nodded, but there was something behind his eyes, concern mixed with guilt. "I should have gotten to you faster. You did everything right," I said firmly. I panicked. "It wasn't your fault." You're like a daughter to me, he said. Softly when I saw you go under like that. I stopped and looked away. I know, I said. I could feel it. He gave a small smile. And we sat there in silence again, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Over the next few days, something shifted between us, not in a bad or inappropriate way, but in a more subtle emotional sense. We talked more. We laughed about things I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. I told him about my struggles with feeling disconnected from Derek lately, about how lonely I felt sometimes in a marriage that was built more on routine than romance. Robert listened without judgment. Marriage gets like that, he said. It's not always fireworks. Sometimes it's just showing up every day, and sometimes it's learning how to fall back in love with the person you already chose. Those words to heart. Robert had been married to Derek's mom for over 30 years. Before she passed away, he knew what it meant to stick it out, to endure, to nurture a bond even when it was hard. His presence, his wisdom, his calm, it started to help me heal, not just from the scare in the pool, but from the emotional drift I'd been feeling for months. A few days before Derek came home, I found myself sitting on the edge of the pool again, feet in the water. Robert came out and sat beside me, sipping his usual iced tea. I'm heading back to Oregon next week, he said. I nodded. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, Emily. We sat in silence, watching the light reflect off the water. Thank you again, I said, not just for saving me that day, for everything, for seeing me. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the tears he was holding back. You're a strong woman, Em. Just don't forget to lean on people now and then. When Derek returned, things were different, but in a good way. I greeted him at the door with a smile that wasn't forced. We talked more. We shared again. Something about Robert's visit, his quiet influence, had reminded me that love isn't always about passion. Sometimes it's about presence, about being there when someone needs you most. Hand